Masechet Baba Batra Daf Chavtet Perek Chizkat Habatim. The Mishnah taught that a chazakah on a home is 3 years, meaning if someone is living in a home for 3 years, then that is proof that they own it, along with a claim that explains how they got it. I bought it, and I've been in it for 3 years, and nobody protested, so that replaces a deed. They don't need a deed to prove that's theirs, that we rely on that. And the question was, what is the source? We already saw two opinions. Rabbi Yochanan said, and the name of those who live in Usha, that we learned it from Shor Tam, that goes to Shor Mu'ad after 3 gores, so 3 times, and then it changes status. And that was a good answer for the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael. And then we said, according to Rabbanan, what do we say? And so Rav Yosef offered a proof from a source from Sefer Yirmiyah, who says, go and write deeds, because you're only going to be living in the homes here in Eretz Yisrael for 2 years, not for 3, and therefore you should hold on to your deeds. However, Abaye challenged that as simply good advice, and so now we have a third answer. Ela amar Rava, shata kamaita machil inish, tarte machil, telat la machil. Rava's source is based on common human behavior, just based on psychology, that a person, if you see someone else on your field, so for the first year, a person might waive his rights. I'm not using that field right now. Someone else is using it. Whatever, it's okay. If for 2 years, he also might waive his rights. But for 3 years, then nobody's going to tolerate more than 3 years to allow the person, more than 2 years, to allow the person to stay there. Certainly he will protest by the 3rd year, before the end of the 3rd year. And that's common behavior. Same thing with a home. If you have an empty home you're not using, and someone's going in and living there for a little while, so people will say, okay, so big deal. And they will waive their right, but a person will not waive his right for more than that. Therefore, if someone lives in a home or is using a field for 3 years and nobody protests, well then it must be that he is the legitimate owner. Because if he was not the legitimate owner, then the legitimate owner would protest by the 3rd year, right? We understand 1 or 2 years. That doesn't, just because you were there for 1 year, could be that the owner was like, it's okay, I don't care, I'm not going to say anything. So he might not protest. So being there for 1 or 2 years is not a proof, but 3 years is a proof. אמר לאביי, אלא מעתה כי הדרה ארעה תהדר לבר מפרא. למה אמר רב נחמן, הדרה ארעה והדרה פרא. Abaye says, according to your logic, once the original owner protests, and he says, this is mine, right, get out. Let's say it's in the 3rd year, and there's no chazakah yet, so he kicks him off. That would mean that when he kicks off the squatter, he would get the land back, but not the produce of those first 2 years, because Rava just said that a person waives his right to use his property for 1 year and and even for 2 years. Waive his right means anything that the land produced, that this guy was squatting on it, that he and took and consumed during that time. It means the legitimate owner waived his rights to them, so he can't get them back. However, that contradicts what Rav Nachman said, that when the real owner protests in the 3rd year and takes his land back, he also gets back all the produce from years 1 and years 2, which is really the original owners and not the squatters. So therefore, Rava's logic does not fit with the ruling of Rav Nachman, who is an earlier Amorah, and so we're assuming that Rava could disagree with Rav Nachman, but we haven't heard that he does. So we modify. Ela amar Rava, shata kamaita la kapid inish, tarte la kapid telat kapid. Rather, the first year, a person, the original or the real owner, will not necessarily protest. Right? He's not going to be so particular. And even the 2nd year, it's not that he's waiving his right to the land and to everything it produces. He's just like, yes, I'm not going to be particular. It's mine, and I'm not giving up my right to it, but I'm too lazy to protest. Let him stay. And the 2nd year also. But 3 years, then a person is going to be particular and he's going to make sure to protest. And therefore, if someone's squatting for 1 or 2 years and nobody protests, that's not necessarily proof. If they're for 3 years and nobody protests, then that's a proof that that squatter is the rightful owner. Amar le Abaye. And this solves the problem before, because he doesn't waive the right, he just didn't protest. When he gets it back during the 3rd year, he will get back the produce from years 1 and 2. He never gave that away. So Abaye rejects this one as well. Ele me'ata kigon hanedebe bar Eliashib de kapde afilu aman de khalif amesra didhu hachiname de la'atar have chazaka v'chitem hachiname imken natata de barecha leshiurin. Abaye says, according to this logic, what if you have people like the house of Bad Eliashib? Those people are very particular. Even if someone just walks on their boundary line, right, just right on the boundary line, they are already particular and they start protesting, hey, get off our land. They take out their shotgun. It's like, all right, get off. And so those people, since they are particular and kick people off and protest immediately, even just for trespassing a little, so that would mean that one could create a chazakah on their land after just 1 minute. Because if someone's on their land for 1 minute, if it's theirs, they would protest. So that means if they don't protest and someone stays there for just a short time, then it must be that it's theirs. So would you say that? And if you say yes, indeed, that's the case, because the fact that they didn't protest, and they would have protested immediately, the fact that they didn't protest immediately means that the squatter is the rightful owner. Well then, how are you going to apply this law? You're going to have to vary it according to every person, every circumstance. There are some people that are particular after 5 minutes. Some people after 1 month. After 1 year. Some people might not be in the mood to protest and not be particular even after 10 years or 20 years. And so you're going to have to go interview each person and what they would be particular with, and only that would be a chazakah. You can't have a legal system where the amount of time is different for every single person. So that is that this logic doesn't work either. So we try again. Ela amarava shata kamaita mizdahar inish bishtare tarteu tlat mizdahar tafe la mizdahar. The way human behavior works is that a person will hold on to his deed for the first year, and he'll also be careful to know where it is for the second year. But more than that, more than 3 years, he's not going to be careful. If you just first buy a property, right? You worked hard, you paid a lot, you got the deed, and you want to make sure that no one will protest or argue with you because you're a newcomer, you just got there. But after 1, 2, 3 years, nobody protested, so you put the deed somewhere in some drawer in some attic. You forgot where it was. Someone took it out. Who knows where it is, because you got used to staying there. And therefore we cannot assume that everybody's going to hold on to their deeds forever, right? For what? For 10 years? For 50 years? Is unreasonable. And that's why for the first 3 years we can assume that if it's yours, you will have a deed. So if someone protests, produce the deed. If you don't have a deed, then what do you mean? If it's yours, you would have had a deed. But after 3 years, the fact that you don't have a deed doesn't mean it's not yours. We can't expect you to keep the deed forever, and that therefore chazakah is 3 years. Amar l'Abaye, ele me'ata mecha shelo befanav la'ateh ve'mecha amar le imachit be'apai hava mizdaharna bishtarai. Abaye is going to attempt to reject this logic as well, because he says, according to this, a protest that's not in front of the face of the squatter should not be registered as a protest, because the squatter will say, well, you went and protested in some Beit Din. I didn't hear about it. If you protested in my presence, then I would have made sure to hold on to the deed, but I didn't know about it. So therefore, your protest is invalid, and I didn't hold on to my deed, right? Because after 3 years of no one protests, then I'm not careful to know where my deed is, and I'm likely to lose it. Just the fact that you protested in some court far away doesn't mean anything to me, because I didn't hear about it. And so therefore, it would have to be in a protest is in front of the person. However, that's not the halacha. A protest can be in a Beit Din. It doesn't have to be in front of the squatter. And so we answer, Ta'amar le chabrach chabra itle, v'chabra de chabra chabra itle. The original owner, the previous owner, can say to the squatter, your friend has a friend, and your friend has a friend. In other words, the news spreads. As long as he protested in a public forum, like a Beit Din, so someone's going to hear about it, and between 2 or 3 degrees of separation, the squatter will hear about it. Oh, someone protested in Beit Din, and within the 3 years, he still has the deed. Someone protested. I better make sure I put the deed in a safe place, because I'm going to have to defend my purchase. And then he'll have it. And in that case, if he doesn't have it, well, then he should. And so if he doesn't have it, then the original owner will take it back. And so we solved Abaye's challenge, and Rava's reasoning stands. Amar Rav Huna, Shalosh Shanim Shamru, Hu Shachalan Risufot. Okay, Rav Huna adds a qualification that in order for a chazakah to be legitimate, it has to be 3 years in a row. It can't be staggered one year now, and then 2 years later, and then sometime after that. It has to be all in a row. My kamashmalan tanena chazkatan shalosh shanim miyom liyom. Wait a second, why does Rav Huna have to say this? Isn't that obvious from the Mishnah that says a chazakah is 3 years from day to day? Doesn't that mean a full consecutive 36 months from the first day of this year till the very last day of the third year? So isn't that obvious that it's consecutive? And we answer, no, I might have thought that from day to day in the Mishnah is to exclude partial years, that you can't do 6 months here and a different 6 months there, and you can't count a partial year as a full year. It has to be a full year from beginning to end. So I might have thought you need 3 full years, yes, but they can be non-consecutive. So I'll do a full year now, and then I'll wait 2 years, and then do a full year then, and then the third one at some time later. I might have thought that they have to be full years, but not consecutive, if I only had the Mishnah. That's why Rav Huna says it has to be consecutive. Amar Rav Chama, umodeh Rav Huna be'atre demovre bageh. Rav Chama, however, makes a limitation on Rav Huna's limitation and says that Rav Huna would agree that they can be non-consecutive years if you're in a place where the custom is to leave the fields fallow. So this is what everybody does. You work the year, let's say 1 year, and then you leave it fallow the next year. It's good for the soil so that it can replenish its nutrients. In that case, since the normal usage is every other year, well then the chazakah could not be 3 years in a row because that's not even the normal usage. So you would make a chazakah if you planted on the field and harvested it years 1, 3, and 5. Then at the end of the 5th year, that is 3 usages, because that's typical not to have it 3 years in a row. Whereas if it's a house, then people don't live in houses every other year. So if you lived in a house with years 1, 3, and 5, then that's where Rav Huna says is law, that would not be a chazakah. Pishita, isn't that obvious that this is the normal usage, so then it can be staggered? And a field that people that people tend to lie fallow. La sericha diika demovar veika de la movar. Gabra movra maudetem amarle. Im ita de dida chavai ibae lach lemizra'a. Kamashmalan damarle hadar a bechule baga la masena lintar. So it's not obvious what Rav Chama says because it could be that he was thinking of the following case where it's not obvious. You're in a place where some people leave their land fallow, and some people don't leave their land fallow. And this guy, who claims that he bought it and is squatting on it and using it, he let it fallow. So we might have told him, listen, if it's yours, then you should have planted it and not left it because you want to show that it's yours. So we might have thought that the original owner would have that claim and then be able to kick him out because he didn't plant it, he let it lie fallow. And therefore, Rav Chama is coming to teach us that the squatter can make the following legitimate claim. It's very difficult to guard one parcel of land in an entire surrounding fields. So if he happens to be in a spot where his neighbors let their fields lie fallow, and now you're saying, well, since you're a new owner, you should have planted it. Yeah, but that means he would have to hire a guard all by himself. Whereas if he waits for a year where everybody is planting, then they can hire a guard together. They can share the costs, and he will guard all of the area. And so that's why it's beneficial for him to do the same as what his neighbors are doing, and that's a legitimate claim, and that is the chidush of Rav Chama. Or another way of answering this Peshita question, the squatter can say, this is beneficial for me because I want the field to produce more later. And so I'm being the best farmer I can, and this is this is good for the land, and I'd rather get more crop in the following year. And so he can simply explain that that was his farming decision to do so, and that is legitimate, and he's allowed to leave it fallow. And the original owner can say, well, if it's yours, you should have planted it. Tenan. Chazkat batim. Batim di b'ma yad'eh, b'lelia la yad'eh. Now, how do we apply this rule of Rav Huna that has to be 3 consecutive years without any breaks? How do we apply that to the house? Because for a house, during the day, people know. There's people in the neighborhood, and they're walking by, and they see that this person, yes, he's living in his house, and they can testify to the fact that every day for these 3 years he's been living in his house. But how about at night? There's nobody around at night that will be checking if he's actually in the house at night. So how would he be able to prove that he had a chazakah at night? And if he can't prove it, then it will not be 3 consecutive years if it's just if you can only prove the daytimes and not the night times. So how could you ever have a chazakah on a house? A couple of answers. Amar Abaye, man mased abatim shibebe medayade bimama ubelelia. Abaye says, after all, who is testifying about the houses in general? It's the neighbors, right? They're the ones that are testifying about the daytime also. And the neighbors, they know about the daytime and they know about the nighttime also. It's not that the witnesses have to be looking through the window and know they're in the house all the time. The point is that they see these people coming in and out, and they don't see them moving out. Right? If someone moves out of a house, then you know they pack up 50 boxes, get a moving truck, right, and the lights are closed all the time, and so neighbors would be able to tell if their people, squatters here, ever moved out, and so they can testify. No, they have been living here. They're here during the day. They're here during the night. We see them come and go, and they never moved out, never moved their stuff out, and so yes, they can testify that this house was being lived in the day and the night. Rava Amar, Kegon Datu Betre Amre, Anan Agrinan Mine, Vedarinan Be, Telachenin Bimama Ubilalia. Rava has another way to explain how you can have a chazakah on a home, even according to Rav Huna, that has to be 3 years consecutively, day and night. He says, for example, if 2 people come and say and testify, we rented the house from this guy, the squatter guy who claims that it's his, and we've been living there day and night. Right? One of the way a chazakah means I am using this home as an owner. Now, an owner can live in the house, but an owner can also rent out the house. And so if it's a case where he rented out the house and the tenants are 2 guys who say, yes, we rented it. And so that's valid testimony, and they can testify about themselves that they lived there day and night. And they know you don't even have to rely on neighbors. The people living there themselves can testify. That's Rava's answer. Amar le Rav Yemal Rav Asher, Hani nogin ba'edutan hen, di la amri hachi, amrinan lehu zilu habu le agar beta lehai. Rav Yemal tells Rav Asher that Rava's logic is flawed because these 2 tenants that are living there, they are biased because their testimony affects them. If they don't testify that they were there day and night, in order to prove that their landowner, their landlord, is the rightful owner, then that landowner will not be their landlord will not be rightful, and then the original previous owner will take over, and then will say, oh, you've been living in this house for the past 3 years, but you've been paying the wrong landlord. He doesn't really own the house, and now you have to pay the rent again to the original owner. And so if that's the case, then you can imagine that these 2 renters will be panicked and will say, oh, this is not good, and they may lie in order to benefit themselves and say, oh no, we've been here day and night, we have a chazakah, even if it wasn't true. Maybe they weren't there day and night, maybe they weren't there for 3 full years, and they would lie, and so therefore they're not trustworthy. And so that's Rav Yemal challenging the logic of Rava. However, Rav Asher defends Rava. Amar le dayaneh d'shvile hachi dayini. And so Rav Asher says, you're right. But only a low-level judge would rule and accept the testimony of these 2 renters if they're living there and they benefit from their own testimony. Right? We wouldn't accept it in that case. Rather, what Ava meant is we're talking about a case where they didn't yet pay the rent. And now they have the money and they're coming and they come to the court and say, who should we give the rent to? Right? Who is the rightful owner? And then we check it out. And this guy claims that, I'm the rightful owner because these are my tenants. And so then we'll ask the tenants to testify, and they testify, yes, we rented it from this guy. We've been living there for 3 years, and therefore we'll give them the money. In this case, they're not biased because they didn't pay yet. So it makes no difference to them whether they say it's the previous owner that they rented it from him, or that they made the deal with him and he's the real owner, or they say the new owner, the guy who's claiming a chazakah, so it makes no difference when they're going to pay the same amount, whether it's to the previous owner or to the new proposed alleged owner. And therefore, since they have nothing to gain or lose either way, that's why we believe their testimony when they say, oh no, we made a deal with this guy that we're going to rent it from him. We haven't paid yet, but we're going to pay him, right? And have you been there day and night living for 3 years? Says, yes, we have. Then there's every reason to believe them. And that's what the case that I was talking about. Amar Mozutra, Vitain Vamar, Letu Teresade, Lasudele, Dedarbe Telat Shene, Bimama Ubilelia, Ta'anate, Ta'ana. Mozutra is a machloket, whether this is relating to this previous case or in general. Let's talk about it just, it's a new statement in general, that if the previous owner comes and makes a claim in court and says, listen, this guy is squatting in my house, and he claims that it's his, but I'm the previous owner and he doesn't have a deed, and I demand that 2 witnesses come and testify that he has been there for 3 years, day and night. If he asks for that, the claim is a legitimate claim, and the burden of proof to bring those witnesses will be on the squatter. That's what Morzutra says. ומודה מורזוטרה ברוכלין המחזירין בעיירות דף אגב דלתן תענינן לענן. And Morzutra concedes. It's really Morzutra is actually adding more to what he just said. There are other versions that have Rava here. So in any case, whoever said it is adding an additional point that if the original previous owner of the home, the one that's making the claim, making the protest, is an itinerant salesman, and he goes from city to city. He's away from his house most of the time. He might go away for a month, and then he'll come back and sleep in his house just at night, and then he'll go away for another few weeks. In that case, he comes and says, hey, you guys, there's someone that's squatting in my house. He's been there for 1 year or 2 years, however long, that we say, even though the original owner, the peddler, does not make this claim for himself, the Bet Din will make it for him. In other words, the Bet Din will help him out and tell the squatter, hey, you have to bring 2 witnesses that you were there day and night. Why? Because since this guy is away from his home most of the time, it would be easy for someone to squat in his home, stay there, right, for the month, and then he hears, oh, the guy's coming home. Okay, so he'll leave for 1 night. The peddler stays in his house for 1 night. And then he goes away for another long trip. And then the squatter will come and stay there again. And so since someone can take advantage of the fact that this guy is away most of the time to squat in his house, then that's why the Bet Din says this is suspicious. You say you have a chazakah and you were there 3 years consecutively, day and night. Well, we are going to make sure that you have testimony that that is the fact, because it would be otherwise easy for you to lie since the original owner is not in his house so often. For some reason, we're coming back to what Rav Huna said now. He said you have to be in a home for 3 years consecutively, day and night. And however, Rav Huna agrees that if it's a store of mechoza, those stores are used during the day, but not at night. There are some places where people sleep in the store. They own a store, and maybe they sleep upstairs. But in mechoza, the stores were open at night, but no one was there. Were open during the day, but no one was there at night. And therefore, a chazakah for one of the stores is the fact that you use it every day. That's the normal usage of an owner. And the fact that it's closed up at night and you're not there, that's the normal usage of an owner. And therefore, you can make a chazakah chazakah just during the day, and Rav Huna would agree with that. Rami bar Chama v'Rav Ukva bar Chama zebuna hi amta behadeh hadadeh mor ishtamish ba rishona shlishit v'chamishit umor ishtamash ba sheniya revi'it v'shishit nefak ar ila vaha. So Rami bar Chama and Rav Ukva bar Chama, brothers, they entered a partnership and bought together a certain maidservant, and they decided to switch off usage. One brother used her the first, third, and fifth year, and the other brother used her in the even years 2, 4, and 6. Now, along the way, there was a protest of the previous owner of this maidservant that said, this maidservant is mine, and they stole it from me. And they said, no, we bought it from you, and we have a chazakah because they have it already for 6 years. Atu lekamed Rava amar lehu mai tama abdi duhachi ki hechi de la tachziku hadadeh ki hechi de lididchu lahave chazakah la'almana mehave lahave chazakah. So Rava was the judge, and he told these brothers, why did you act in this way and switch off? You're going to be partners in acquiring this maidservant. Why didn't you have it that one brother, Rami, you use her for 3 years, and then she will be a slave to Rav Ukva for the next 3 years? Why don't you break it up like that? Why'd you stagger it? He says, I know why you did that, so that neither of you would have a klema chazakah against the other. Because if Rami bar Chama had her first for 3 years, then he would be able to claim, oh, I bought her alone, myself, and she's only mine. I don't have to share her with my brother Rav Ukva. And so Rav Ukva didn't want that to happen, and so same thing vice versa. And that's why they scattered it, so that neither one would have a chazakah against the other. They didn't trust each other too much. And he said, just like you don't have a chazakah with regard to each other, you don't have a chazakah at all with regard to anyone else. And therefore, the previous owner who comes and says, she is mine, and you don't have a deed or any proof that you bought her and she's yours, you're a chazakah, even though you've had her for 6 years, but it's staggered, and therefore there is no chazakah, and she returns to the original owner. However, Rava's ruling would only apply if there's no document that says that they are partners and that they're going to make a deal like this. But if they wrote a document, and that they said, okay, we are sharing our ownership of this maidservant, and we're going to switch off and use her jointly. Well, then a document has publicity because you have to go to a scribe, and there are witnesses, and so then the word will get around. And then, since word gets around that they have it together, so then even though they're switching off, but the fact they are partners is known. So the partnership owned her for more than and used her for more than 3 years without protest, and therefore the chazakah, if there was a document, would be valid. Amar Rava, achala kula chutz mi bet roba, kana kula chutz mi bet roba. Rava says, let's say someone is on the land using it, consuming it for 3 years, and he grows things on the entire land, a big piece of land, except for there's one piece that's even a quarter of a kav, and that he doesn't use. He just leaves that. He doesn't bother planting on it. In that case, after 3 years, he has a chazakah for the whole thing, but not for that part that he didn't plant on. You don't say that, well, he has a chazakah for most of the land, therefore he gets the whole land. No, any part that he did not actually use, he does not have a chazakah, and therefore if he doesn't have a deed, the previous owner can come and say, oh, look, that little part you didn't use, so that's mine, right? And he can take it back. Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua velamaran ela de bar ziriyahi avala bar ziriyahi kani la agav ar'ah. Rav Huna the son of Rav Yoshua qualifies Rava's statement and says that's only if that small amount of land, the bet rova, is suitable for planting. Then you say if it was yours, you would have planted it, so it must be it's not yours. But if it's an area that's not suitable for planting, like it's just a rocky area, well then the squatter acquires the field along with the rest, acquires that area along with the rest of the field, right? This is part of the field. He planted and consumed the entire field for 3 years, except that spot. but that spot is just rocks. So we assume that that's part of the field that he acquired, and that is sufficient proof that it's really his, the whole thing. Matkif la Rabbevai bar Abaye. Ela me'ata sunama bama yikne. אלא בעוקמה בחבטה ומשטחה בפרה. החנמה היא באה אלה לעוקמה בחבטה אינמה משטחה בפרה. However, Rabbevai bar Abaye challenges the statement of Rav Huna and says, wait, according to you, let's say you have a rocky area, how could someone ever acquire it? In order to acquire land, you have to do something. You have to use it in a way that an owner uses it. And so you're saying a rock has no usage? But that's not true. It does have a usage. How would you acquire a rocky area? I know. You would either put your animals there or spread out fruit to dry out in the sun in that area. So just like you can acquire a rocky area by using it in one of those two ways, so too here, this alleged buyer should have planted the whole rest of the field, and when it came to this rocky area, he should have used it, put animals there, or spread out fruit to dry on it, and that's how he would show that it's his. If he didn't do any of that, so then there's no chazakah, because he didn't use it. He could have used it, and he didn't, and therefore he does not have a chazakah on that, and therefore Rava's ruling applies even to a rocky area. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen v'amen.